It would seem Brittany, by far, has the better life. But does she? Because while Brittany is a fictitious character, there are many Brittnys in the world. And even though they are some of the wealthiest people, these people often live miserable lives. Be it the petty pursuit of popularity among equally vapid people, the constant acquisition of luxury items that serve no practical purpose in life, pursuing meaningless careers that are merely elaborate ways to avoid real work, or engaging in equally meaningless relationships with people who are only concerned with popularity and materialism. In the end, the lives of Brittnys are hollow, shallow, and unfulfilling ones, replete with antidepressants and a never-ending pursuit to fill the hole in their soul with limitless material things. And therefore, while Brittany is surrounded by wealth and opulence, her life has ironically been a complete waste, and likely a miserable one at that. It is here many people will, rightly, point out that Brittany is miserable because she has no agency or purpose in life, or that she was conditioned by society to have unattainably high expectations and was doomed to misery when she couldn't attain them, or that Brog would lead a happier life in that he has successes or accomplishments he had to work for, and therefore gave his life an intrinsic value. These things are all true and are in part why rich Brittany, ironically, has a poorer life than poor Brog. But a much more fundamental thing is at play that explains why Brittany is more miserable than Brog. And that is because she's had too much of a good thing. Take modern American obesity as an example. For nearly all of humanity's 200,000 years on this planet, more food always equaled better, for the sole fact that hunger and starvation was the main problem facing humans. It wasn't until the industrial and agricultural revolutions that we were really able to solve hunger a very short 50 years ago. It is so recent in human history, there are people still alive today who had to tighten their belts in bad economic times. But today, food is abundant. So abundant, in fact, it is long past the optimal level of food humans should eat, now harming people instead. And now, the problem we face today is not one of starvation or malnutrition, but morbid obesity, heart attacks, stroke, and diabetes. The same thing applies to humanity's desire for all material things throughout all of history. Mrs. Brog no doubt wanted a larger cave. Brog Jr. wanted a better spear. Brog's Hittite descendants wanted a better chariot. And Brogius Maximus of Rome wanted some finer wines. Broguet de la France insisted on a nicer wig, and Johnny Revolutionary War Brogson wanted a better musket. His great-grandson Joey Brogson wanted a faster car in 1950, and his millennial descendant, Madison Brogson Pelosi Chomsky, insisted on only the most expensive avocado on her toast. Throughout history, more was always better. But just like we've passed the optimal level of food in our diets, we've passed the optimal level of more in our lives, to the point it's starting to harm us. Kids no longer get shoes, but brand-name sneakers that are used as bragging pieces on the playground. We don't go to college because of the education it provides us, but rather for the overpriced American indulgence of the college experience. Every white-collar dope buys an $80,000 luxury truck, not because they're hauling things with it, but instead as a means to compete with the equally vapid MBA bros with leased Mercedes. And perhaps the epitomal example of economic waste, as well as proof Americans have lost their communal economic shit, is the existence of a $200,000 handbag. There are women who actually pay $200,000 for a fucking handbag. But the real damage is not so much the financial hardship that comes with trying to afford these impractical things, nor is it the outright destruction of personal relationships a blind pursuit of more wreaks, though these things alone destroy people's standards of living. It is in the fact humans have evolved to always progress. Humans have evolved to be addicted to more because it's how we survived. And even though today many of us have enough, the human mind is actually incapable of understanding enough. Thus, we are eternally damned to pursue more, even if more has long ago ceased being beneficial to our lives. This has turned us into drug addicts looking for a high that will simply never be. And so, humanity devolves into seeking increasingly petty things in our genetically programmed pursuit of achieving more, rendering us slaves to things that will never tangibly improve our standards of living, and certainly never make us happy. And while philosophers in the past would term this materialism or consumerism, when you boil it down to its base elements, it's even more pathetic than that. Because at the end of the day, all Americans are pursuing are essentially two pathetic things: brand names and bragging. Does Brittany have nicer shoes than Trisha? Does Thaddeus have a nicer car than Chip? The Johnsons just moved into the posh new development in the coveted school district. But the Joneses bought a nicer house with 2 more bedrooms in it. Trisha's kid got accepted to Columbia, but Becky's kid got accepted to Vassar. But of course, none of that matters, because Brittany bought her $200,000 handbag in New York and finally showed all those bitches in Highland Park who's boss. And yet, everyone is so miserable, it's debatable if their lives are even worth living. This is the price of holding on to the outdated standards of living of more, well beyond their use. There's a little bit of Brittany in all of us. While Brittany is a fictional stereotype of a very wealthy person from Edina, there is a bit of Brittany in all of us. If for any other reason, it's our genetics. You as a human being will always want more. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. It's perfectly fine to want a nice sports car. It's perfectly fine to want to have a nice steak dinner. It's okay if you want to one-up your buddies with a dapper suit. And there's nothing wrong with being rich. But the risk we face today as a society is to unconsciously continue our blind genetic pursuit of more, to the point, like obesity, materialism ruins our lives. We need to acknowledge traditional economic standards of living no longer serve us and are actually harming us. We need to realize old measures of standards of living have stagnated the human race from advancing, enslaving us to petty human emotions like arrogance, envy, and pride. And we need to realize these obsolete standards are making us miserable, as our lives are reduced to nothing more than bragging rights and brand names. Therefore, there is a much-needed call for new and revolutionary economic standards of living. Standards of living that go beyond materialism and consumption and allow us to fulfill our human genetic desire to progress and pursue happiness. Standards of living that slap people across the face, wake them up, and convince them to abandon the outdated standards that are harming them. Standards of living that will liberate humanity and usher in a whole new world of economic potential, drastically improving the lives of humans today and forever into the future. We need to stop worrying about our first world problems today and replace them with zero world problems tomorrow.